What's up, guys? I'm Emily with Emlovz. So excited to talk today with the man, the myth, the legend, Khan. He's going to be talking to us, and we're going to be sharing a conversation about dating as an Asian man in America, because it just is not it's not the easiest thing to do, and nobody's really talking about it. So thank you so much for being with me, for sharing your story, and for hopefully bringing this conversation to, out into the public.
Yeah, well, hey, I've known you for a while. I've seen the business grow. You're really out here doing the Lord's work. Just thank you so much for having me. And just being interested in having this discussion. I think that being an Asian American male, in the United States, certainly has its own kinds of trials and tribulations and things like that. I think the fact that you want to start a dialogue, that's something I really appreciate, and hopefully your viewers do too. And again, like I don't speak for the race, but certainly. I can speak to what it is that I know and I've experienced, and I just hope that that's all useful to you and your audience.
Yeah, I love it. I think it's so relevant. So if you don't mind, I just want to start with a question. We can go in a lot of directions, and I love some of the notes that you sent over, but
Yeah.
I'm just curious to know a little bit about just how dating as an Asian man, how that has impacted you, or how do you feel that it's different for you than it would be if you were, say, a Chad or,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah. It's funny, right? Because like I have that note where like I grew up, kind of in a context where I thought that Asian men were like masculine as all hell, right? So it wasn't until like I got older that I kind of encountered this this stereotype or this perspective that Asian men are, not masculine and masculine, or like effeminate, or kind of what have you. I would say that, maybe dating as an Asian American male, some things that might kind of stand out to me, and this also might just be part of, kind of like micro, mid, macro, as like the Fung brothers have pointed out in their video. Like I spent most of my life in the Bay Area, so I think that in certain ways, like that colors the context and my life experience. But, I'm not like super built, right? I'm like my physical stature does not command, I suppose, like the greatest presence just physically, right? Like I think girls have talked to me about my height, and they've been like, hey, like you're not like that tall, like I can't wear these heels around you. And that also is like something that like I actually like never cared about, but I think at a certain point, something that's kind of outside there in the world. I mean, I'm Southern Chinese and like Western Japanese, and like you put that together, and like you've got yourself like some of the smallest people like on this planet, like the whole thing with height, that's definitely something that I've encountered. I think as well, it might just be that I've dated a lot of Asian women. I don't think I've really dated that many maybe white women, Latino women, or black women, what have you. I've definitely had like good interactions with them, but I would say that it's like they're probably the 1%, right? I don't think I've gone on, that many dates with, women kind of outside the, the Asian population, Asian community. That might just be a function of like where I live. But at the same time, like I don't think I'm getting a lot of attention from like women who are, non-Asian. I think as well, like, there might be certain discussions about kind of like what I'm doing, or like there might be certain kind of like cultural things. It's kind of like, oh, like, um, like, yeah, I think in the Bay Area that there's a lot of discussion about like what you do for work. And I don't know if that's something that like everyone experiences to a high degree, but sometimes, I think I've heard that like if you're not like bossing out like as an Asian dude, like it might be more difficult for you to like get with girls and things like that. And so I think in certain ways, like there might be kind of socioeconomic standards that like maybe if I'm like not like an engineer, or like I haven't secured the bag like out of grad school or something like that, like that might be something that I think I experience. But it kind of is what it is, right? And I think like I said that in the notes, right, as we were kind of discussing earlier today, is that like I think Asian men, yeah, they do have to, be twice as good to get kind of the same kind of relevance, or like that same visibility in the market. But I also don't necessarily think that being Asian per se, like in and of itself, is an inherent disadvantage. So that's kind of like one of the paradoxes that I think I might have experienced or something like that. So
Can you tell me a little bit about like where the benefits are? Like what is, if it's a stereotype, like what are the good stereotypes that you can leverage? And then what are the stereotypes where you feel like you have to do twice as much to even stand out?
Yeah, so I think what maybe this is two birds, one stone, but I think the sad part is that like I don't think people really expect Asian men to like have any swag or like to be, skillful like in the game. And so in certain ways, like you can just come out and shock people with, with your conduct, or like if you have like really tight game, or you're just out there spitting your gift, like you can go out there and you can really shock people. Because unfortunately I think there can sometimes be a dynamic of either, maybe a person's unfamiliar with dealing with an Asian person, or maybe there could just be like an outright underestimation of like the bachelor skill, like because they're Asian. But I've definitely found things where, if you just look at all the stereotypes, right, like they're quiet, they don't like conflict, they don't, they're very kind of to themselves. um like you and me both know, right, we're both dancers. Like you get me on the dance floor and I like blow all that out of the water, right? And I've been with a lot of people, a lot of Asian folks who are great dancers, who are great performers, who are great public speakers, and people who can really shatter a lot of that just in one fell swoop, right? And so I think kind of the sad part is like the overarching, I suppose, stereotype, both for men and women, I would say, is that kind of, Asian people are meek and they're quiet, and once you start getting out there and like you get loud, and you turn up, I think a lot of people are kind of shocked by that. And it can be a good, I've gotten good reception from that. I've gotten negative reception from that. And so I think it all just kind of depends on the person. And I think that if there's something that like I have to overcome, probably like it's probably physical stature. Like I think there's that aspect, but that's like something you can't change about yourself. So yeah, you like maybe you're kind of outside of the, maybe you're outside of like the filter or like that selection range just for that, right? But if that's kind of what it is, then maybe you don't have to, like maybe those aren't people you want to be with. I think as well, kind of like that meek stereotype where people like don't think I'm going to say something, like people think they can either disrespect you or say something to you, and they kind of expect that to just go over real smooth. Like if you want to like say something, if I'm offended, like I'm gonna say something, right? And I think that a lot of times people don't expect that, and they like get offended by maybe those interactions, right? So I think the kind of overcoming the stereotypes as a whole kind of has its kind of has its way about a person. But I would say hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah. And I don't think we talked about it a lot, but I love what you had to say before we were chatting about like how you were raised and how you viewed masculinity, and then how it was like such a shock to you that people didn't see that. Can you tell me more about that? And like,
Yeah, so right, like I'm half Japanese and I'm half Chinese. I grew up kind of at home with like my Japanese grandmother, and we would watch like all these samurai movies, and like we'd watch NHK broadcasts, and like I would watch like all the samurai dramas like with her and things like that. And so I mean, and again, like my earliest my earliest recollection memory of television is like of a samurai movie, of like this like really just like gruesome battle, like and I don't know why I was watching that when I was like 4 years old, but like here we are, right? So there's a whole bunch of guys who look like me who are like just going at it, right? And then I think that as I watch these movies, and I watch these dramas, and I just have all this kind of media, like I don't see the Asian man or the Asian woman for that matter like as a caricature, right? Like I see the whole spectrum. Like the Asian guy can be the hero, the Asian woman can be the hero, they can be the villain, they can be flawed, and they can be all these things, right? Like an Asian man in an Asian movie can like totally be a dork, right? Like there's always like there's always stuff like that, right? And so I've like always just thought that, especially coming from like like samurai movies as a genre, that's like hyper masculine, right? So I've always thought that Asian men were like masculine as all hell. Like I never thought that like an Asian man for whatever reason would be like effeminate, right? I mean, I'm like, yo, dude, like, have you seen like what these guys do to each other? Like that's like manly as all hell sometimes, right? And obviously, like violence is not the answer and things like that, right? But if you're looking at like physical strength or like anything like that, like I don't care if you're 5'5". If you're in armor coming at me with like 3 feet of surgical steel, like I don't care how manly you are. That shit's scary, right? So I think that then I go out into the world and then I kind of come up on this stereotype where like Asian men are like not and like Asian men are this way. I mean, I thought that was a joke, but then like I started seeing that in TV, and then I kind of thought to myself like, oh man, like I mean, then this kind of sucks. Like this is what people think Asian men are. And like don't even get me started on like Asian women, right? Because like that whole thing is like its own discussion, and like I think it's a travesty that like it's just like this is the way like we in America think like Asian people are, when it's like not a monolith or anything like that, right? But I had the privilege to like kind of have these superheroes, like to have these samurai figures just kind of in my life to kind of show me like, hey, this is like what you could be, or this is what it used to be like, or what have you, right? Just like some frame of reference. So I suppose though that like one issue with that is that like I've never asked myself like, how come Asian people aren't like in TV more? Right now,
Right.
I think it sucks that it's always like a dork or something, or you got like the hypersexualized like mysterious dragon lady or something like that.
Yeah,
Like
right.
that's like that like that's whack, right? But I think an issue is that because I've always kind of been around, like whether it's like samurai movies, kung fu movies, or what have you, like I've always seen Asian men as someone who's like very strong. So in the United States, I was kind of like, all right, dude, like you can portray Asian men however you want, but like that for sure is not the truth. But of course, like a lot of that media, it probably affects like, kind of interracial relations and things like that in the United States, right? And, being corporate, right? Like I don't know if, any of this affects the perception of me being a leader versus like just being like a good kind of like task oriented employee or what have you, right? Like do people just think I'm an Excel monkey, or like can I go out there and sell work to these like private equity firms or whatever, right? So that's like something that I also have to think about too. So
Yeah. Interesting. Really interesting. Um, well, I have some tough questions that I don't know if I want to ask or not, but
yeah.
what would you like women like me to know about dating an Asian man?
um it's like not that much different than like dating other people. Like I think, yeah, I mean sometimes like some of my interactions is with people who are non-Asian, it can be like very academic, right? It's almost like they're like Jane Goodall and like I'm like a gorilla in the forest. Like they want to like observe me, and they want. And I'm just like everybody else, right? Like I'm really not that different. It's kind of interesting because I look at especially with Asian cinema, or like Asian people portrayed in cinema, right? Like oftentimes there's this trope of like this mysterious like Asian person who has like the ancient secrets of like the Tang dynasty at their disposal or some bullshit, right? And it's like it's not like that. I don't think Asian people are really that different. I think that I think it could be very rich. I think that the yoke of culture for Asian Americans still very strong. Like whether or not like you have any connection to like the motherland, like the Asian culture, like it mobs pretty deep. Like it's just a series of inside jokes that like all Asian people just kind of understand, right? Just by being part of this community, right? And I think there's like a lot of richness there. I don't think Asian people are really that different. So I mean, then again, it's not just to say like, oh, like let me just like tick this off. But then just like say, hey, like this is just like another experience I can have achievement unlocked, right? But I don't think Asian men are really that different than other folks, and yeah, I think in that sense it's not to be like exotic or not. Like I think Asian people are really just people at the end of the day too. Really not that much different. And even if they are, or even if there are cultural differences, like just kind of by virtue of like your life experience, what have you, like isn't that fun? Like isn't that an opportunity, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I know when I did my 100 date experiment when we were in college together,
Yeah.
um I had never dated an Asian guy. I'd never
Mhm.
dated a Middle Eastern guy. I'd never dated, there was quite a few that I had never dated. And I did have these beliefs that were probably put into my mind.
Mhm.
And I remember like actively challenging them. And that's what I teach my students now is like
Mhm.
challenge those assumptions because somebody put them in your head. Maybe you're right about it, right? And that could be race, it could be age, it could be education level, political
Yeah.
standing, it
Oh
could
yeah.
be all of these things that we think, oh no, this is what I want. But have you challenged those assumptions? And have you asked yourself where they even came from? Right? Because a lot of times our parents, they have beliefs that get taught to us or the media. And so my question to you would be like, if you could impart the ability to really parse through a person's character and not look at those things, how would you, like from your own experience, and you say that you really look at the character over those, you're not trying to get just like a white girl to be on the scoreboard. How did you for yourself learn to challenge that, and what are the things that you look for when you're thinking through that?
Yeah, so that's funny, right? Because I think that like so for example, like if you're just looking at stereotypes, right? Like having been subject and subjected to stereotypes, I don't know if I want to like put that out into the world either, right? So like I'm not gonna go around and be like all white women are Karens, right? Like that's not like that's not the code, right? And I don't think that's the way that you want to do that. In terms of kind of parsing through things, I mean, you know, it might be to like really go back inside and like introspect very deeply. Like, do you only date certain people because you're like afraid of something, or like, and just be like very honest about that, right? I don't know if I'm like necessarily afraid of one thing or the other, but certainly like dating an Asian girl, like it doesn't hurt that like I'm also Asian and I may have come up in in like similar circumstances, or we have like a similar life view, right? Like I'm sure like that doesn't hurt me there, right? Does that stop me from dating other people? I would say largely not, but I think we're human, right? We want to we want to be near something, or we want to kind of approach something that's like more familiar to us, right? But I think that maybe if you're like parsing through some of this stuff, it's more, I honestly feel like it's more about you. I don't know if it's so much about like the girl or the boy, or whoever is like counterparty to all this. I think that you have to look inside yourself and ask yourself, like, is this real? Like where does this come from? Am I coming from, and even if you don't know the origin, like whether it's your parents or societal, you ask yourself, like, is this from a place of fear? Like, is this from a healthy place? Like, do I look at this because like, are there other factors that are like important to me, right? Because I've also had to acid test some of this stuff, right? Like, yeah, like you can go out there and get the doctor, or like the highly educated person, all these credentials, alphabet soup, like behind their name, but like if they don't respect you, like I don't know how much that counts, right? Like, and then you kind of look at what are these experiences like mean to you? Like, are you debunking the myth, right? Because I've met people who like don't have an education, and they're some of the wisest, most successful business people, most generous people I've ever met. And then you meet some of these PhDs out there, and you're like, they won't give you the time of day because they think they're better than you, right? Because they have like this Ivy League education or whatever, right? And so I think in that sense, you ask yourself, yeah, I mean, like people are like, hey, like go get yourself like an educated girl that's humble and respectful, and like and intelligent and like cool and just like easygoing and not prejudiced and blah blah blah. And I'm kind of like, why does that all matter, right? And I think that if you go and investigate that and say like, do I want it because of status? Do I want it because like my mom is gonna like approve? Do I want that because like I can go tell my friends like, well, I got this smart girl, or what have you, right? Like you have to know why the criteria matters. And I think the only way to do that is just to be really brutally honest with yourself about those types of things. And I think as well in your dating experience, perhaps for your clients, like they got to go out there and see like why they control and they ask for certain things, or they're looking for certain things, and just to see if that actually makes them happy, you know?
Totally. So good to talk with you. So good to hear your opinions. I think this is such an important topic that we don't talk about enough, that we should talk about. I want to see an Asian bachelor. Hello, let's go. I want to see an Indian
Yeah.
bachelor. I want to see some representation in the world.
Very
I'm
much
glad
so,
things are
for that.
changing, but there's more than just black and white out there. And so thank you so much for talking with me about this and sharing your thoughts and feelings with the community. If you're watching this and you have feelings, are you in your feelings like we've been in our feelings today talking about this? Please leave a comment below. Let us know what's going on for you, if, you know, in any context, really. Like, I think this is such an important conversation. And yeah, thank you so much. If you guys like this video, make sure to like it, subscribe to the channel, and leave us a comment in the comments below.